All right, today is January 13th, Friday the 13th. Okay, I'm not superstitious, but I'm going to go ahead and do this video anyway. I want to get this on the air, which is giving those of you who might be aware, might not be aware of the latest lawsuit in the loss of Trans World Airlines Flight 800. There is a wrongful death lawsuit occurring right now. It started about 4 months back or so. The early phases, I think, right around the summer, where Thomas Stalcup and the families of Flight 800 have put forward a wrongful death lawsuit regarding the loss of this aircraft. Now, for those of you who are familiar with this aircraft crash, it happened in July 17th, 1996. Off the coast of Long Island on July 17th. There was an NTSB investigation. The NTSB came to the conclusions that a malfunction in the center wing tank, an electrical short of some sorts, and as they put it, flammable fuel vapors is what brought this aircraft down. Since then, of course, there were the other possible theories, a bomb or a missile. I'm not going to get involved into that aspect right now. I'm just trying to update on this latest. However, the NTSB case took about 4 years. During that time, there were still those who believed that there was another cause, just because they had issues with the NTSB report. The NTSB and the CIA, as well as the FBI, getting involved in an air crash is something which is not usual. There were reports of streaks in the sky, rocket-like, flare-like objects seen, and then a large fuel air explosion. This is what prompted people to start looking at other causes. It was quite implausible that you could have a center wing fuel tank explosion with kerosene. Kerosene is about as dangerous as a jar of peanut butter. Okay, I can say this because my rating in the United States Navy was, you can see right here, an aviation bosun's mate. My job primarily worked with the handling of aircraft, crash firefighting, crash and salvage crew. I am very familiar with aviation kerosene, jet fuel, and I'm also was in the Navy aircraft firefighter and structural firefighter. So I have at least a 5th grade knowledge of fire science. And having worked on the fire mat with aviation kerosene, I know that kerosene is not as exotic and as dangerous and as wildly explosive as some people try to make it claim. Since that case, there have been quite a few lawsuits, Freedom of Information Act lawsuits regarding particular aspects of this case, because most aviation professionals will tell you that there's quite a few issues with the government's explanation of a fuel tank explosion. This got up into very, very many long, lengthy, lonely, expensive endeavors for quite a few individuals, not all agreeing on all aspects of the case, but where they did agree one thing. The NTSB's Zoom climb theory at the end of this, where witnesses were mistaking crippled aircraft in flight as being a missile. Well, that's kind of an oxymoron because there's no such thing as crippled flight. Either you're flying or you're not. Okay? This can open up a door for many other people to just type in TWA Flight 800 and then you can have at it. You'll spend weeks going over many things. I got involved in about 2000 with Captain Ray Lair He's a former Navy pilot. Then he became a United airline captain. He's been an NTSB investigator himself. He's worked on at least, I believe it was 7 or 8 air crash investigations. He was also the ALPA, Airline Pilots Association, represented safety representation, and he's received several awards for his work. And when he saw the NTSB videos of this tragedy and how the NTSB and CIA were putting it forward, there was a lot of questions. So he began putting in Freedom of Information Act requests, asking the NTSB for specific or certain of crash records. The NTSB was not forthcoming. The NTSB was not helpful from the start. They did everything they could to stop records from being released. They used every possible FOIA exemption to try not to release records rather than what the NTSB is used for and meant for, to release records. Now, Captain Lahr rightly said, he said in all his investigations, he said this is the only one handled where a lot of generalized technical information was not being released, where all of these trade secrets and all this proprietary and all the hidden information. He's like, this is an aircraft investigation. This isn't rocket science. This isn't something that's beyond the realm of any aviation or aeronautical professional to understand. Now, I worked on the flight deck with the aircraft. I went to school for this. Naval Air Technical Training Center. I sat in crash and firefighting. So I wasn't necessarily buying the exploding dynamite, extremely powerful, kerosene scenario that they were putting forward. Ray Lair was involved in his lawsuit. It was about 4 years we were in court. I had emailed, and through some letter mail, I contacted Captain Lair and offered him some of my technical essays in support of his lawsuit. They were very thankful for what I offered, and I was glad that I could help. Well, during the transitions of this lawsuit, the judge was, as Lair said in his own words, a no-nonsense judge. In the lawsuit, he didn't get everything he wanted because there were quite a few FOIA requests, as many as 145 specifics. But a lot of those were able to get narrowed down to more generalized. This is what a court document is called the genuine issues. The genuine issues are those which the plaintiffs and the defendants can both agree on. Okay, where it's due diligence and vetting. We both agree on these specific points, and then you narrow it down further. Lair was trying to find out how on earth did the National Transportation Safety Board and the CIA come up with this idea that an aircraft that's literally been blown in half, literally, could continue to fly. Why they didn't even have to go that far. They were already ahead of the game. They didn't have to put this in there. But anyway, that's another side of the story. The other portion was that the exploding kerosenes. Like I said, kerosene it's a baby. It's extremely stable. It's very low volatility. Its flashpoint is very difficult to ignite. That's why it has to be misted or atomized. Such as like in fuel injection when it goes into the engine for it to expand the gases to help perpetuate a turbofan engine. Because a portion of the turbofan engine operation is from the pressure of the wind into the turbofan itself, which provides torque and turning power. Okay, so that's why you have to have both basically a positive air pressure feed into the turbofan engines. It's not like a jet fighter. It can't perform like a jet fighter. 747s turn very slowly. They climb very slowly. They descent, turn, roll, angles, yaw, slow angles. They don't stop on a dime. So a lot of these flight performances The government had this aircraft actually improving its performance after the accident. Well, the long and short of that was Rayleigh received a most favorable decision from Judge Howard Matz in the California court. For everything that Lair put in, I said it's too lengthy to explain here, but he received a favorable decision. The NTSB was essentially impeached based on the evidence that Rayleigh and his experts provided. That the government records, too many questions, too many things were just found to be wrong with this investigation. The NTSB didn't even try to appeal some of the positions put forward. They had no response, solely because they knew they had no response. Now, I tried to contact the local medias on this. I gave them court documents, court case information, and said, hey, look, this is not some conspiracy quack out here saying something. These are aviation professionals that know what they're talking about. There's problems with the NTSB case. I provided CBS 47 here in Jacksonville, Florida, WTLV Channel 12, here in Jacksonville. I sent letters to their news medias with court document. I have plenty of documentation. I mean, I had more than enough. And 47 at a time called back and was interested a little bit, but then for some reason they just stopped contacting. They didn't want to carry on this story. And I said, you need to understand how your government's working here. People have a right to know that the NTSB has not been forthcoming on this crash case. Well, automatically they think, okay, well, if you don't agree with the government, then you're a conspiracy kook. Okay, if you don't believe that an aircraft that's blown in half flies, then you're the kook. If I tell them no, when an aircraft breaks in half, it falls, then they look at me like I'm the idiot. Okay, well, be that as it may. This thing went quiet for a while. I still continued to do what I could do. I do my postings on YouTube, and I've got into quite a few heated conversations with people on YouTube regarding this incident. I've heard the most ridiculous comments from people who prefer to attack me rather than answer questions on the evidence. And I provided them with plenty of links, with court documents, and some people just feel the need. They have to say that, the government's right no matter what. Okay, that's all fine and well, but that doesn't help the 230 family members, because we're not talking about a barge that ran into a pier somewhere and we're trying to collect damages for that. We're talking about 230 families' lives have been changed. 230 people, no fault of their own, no fault of the airlines, no fault of Boeing Aircraft Corporation. This aircraft went down, and quite a few bona fides. And we did have, in Lair's case, testimonies provided to the court by way of affidavits on a radar traffic. We had the Coast Guard that was out there. The Coast Guard was out there on fishery patrols. In the area off of Long Island, there were civilian aircraft transiting the airspace from every direction. There were private pilots out there that night. There were fishing boats out there, trawlers. There were pleasure cruisers, people in boats out there. And for all of that air traffic back and forth, for all the private pilots flying out there, nobody saw a United States Navy vessel. Okay, they didn't see a cruiser, they didn't see a destroyer, they didn't see an aircraft carrier. Yet, some sites were putting out there that there were certain radar tracks that indeed proved that this was the Navy. Well, they never did prove that it was the Navy. They put a theory out there that these radar tracks have to be, because we know one thing. We know that the exploding fuel tank scenario is impossible. Okay, it's never happened before. Now, I've received a lot of arguments and feedback from people regarding, well, what about this aircraft and that aircraft? That's a whole different story and a whole different scenario. Okay, for an aircraft getting struck by lightning, back when they were using more highly flammable fuels, they were using gasoline mixtures with kerosene. Situations. They spoke about the Philippines aircraft and the Thai aircraft. Well, the Philippines aircraft, and I found that early on, that's then disappeared, but Commander Donaldson brought that up. He said that was a cabin fire. I even had the photographs of it, and people can find the photographs themselves that show how the top portion of the aircraft and the cabin was destroyed by fire. The NTSB, in order to perpetuate this exploding kerosene in the dangerous fuel tanks and the need for inerting and all this stuff for political purposes, tried to say, oh, it was just another dangerous center-wing tank explosion on these Boeing aircraft. But the Philippines plane, that was a cabin fire that got out of control. The pictures show that. There was a Thai Airways aircraft. I have to look back on the date, so you could look them up yourself. But the AP report was it was an assassination attempt on the prime minister at that time. There was a bomb that was placed in the center section somewhere in the aircraft. When the Thai authorities were investigating this after the explosion happened, they went through it and they tested it and everything, and it was definitely a bomb. Okay, on this aircraft. The prime minister was set to come, but the timing was off or something. The bomb prematurely exploded. Right, the political aspects, as said, it's in the AP report. But when the Thai authorities went through this, our government generously went over there and decided, okay, we're going to give you a hand on this investigation. When they went through, they decided to go back and say, well, that was just a fuel tank explosion. So whenever I'm being questioned on this, people will say, well, what about this? What about that aircraft? You know? Well, this wasn't from just a plane just sitting there and just for some reason it just got so hot or whatever, and then, you know, some electrical or something happened to blow this plane up. That doesn't happen. This is kerosene. Um, and it's, like I said, it's as dangerous as peanut butter. Okay? You try to light it off on the fire mats. It took a while, okay, to get a fire started. And then it's a lazy fire until finally it builds up enough heat. And then, of course, it's going to get up to its auto ignition temperature, and then you're going to have a much more rapid and dangerous fire. Okay, but anyway, I'm trying not to get off track here. The lawsuits were continuing. Thomas Stalcup is one of the purveyors or the most interested party on this particular wrongful death lawsuit. This one came up here to my attention a few months ago, but I noticed a couple things were occurring here that that this lawsuit could not or would not be possible without the whistleblower statement. There's a young man, Navy veteran, such as myself. He was an operations specialist, he states. I don't have any reason to doubt anything on the surface that he would say, but until you begin vetting this information, okay? I always give the benefit of the doubt, but what I do is I present bona fides, which I call my documentation, public records that I have, and say, okay, these are legitimate questions that you would be asking. The man's name is, and he's online. You can find him under William H. Keel III. He's been on the Duke Report and another report. I'll think of it here shortly. Um, um, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now on the name of the other, uh, Stu Peters, I think I want to say. Um, and he sat down and gave his statements, not necessarily a testimony because he's not gone to court under oath. He's made his statements that he was on the USS Carr, which is a guided missile frigate, fast frigate guided missile ship. And he states that he was out there with another ship. At first, he wasn't sure which ship it was, but later came to say that it was the USS Leyte Gulf, which is a guided missile cruiser, a CD-55. All right. In his scenario, he says that they were to be test firing these missiles based on this new radar guidance system. Most people know it as it's been coined specifically as the Aegis system. The Aegis system is supposed to also be working with the ballistic missile defense systems for being able to intercept and bring down any immediate range or sometimes long range. The Aegis systems can be land-based or out at sea. The purpose is to be able to have a ship close enough to a launch point to be able to intercept any incoming missiles. It's a great idea. However, as Mr. Teal went on to state in his testimony, I could just say that you could just look it up. Just put in William H. Teal III, and you're going to find his videos and his statements. Now, when I began looking and vetting information, I was not finding that 105 was active. 105 and several areas were out there on the FAA log were available for use, but no ship had ever checked in. Early in my research, I came across congressional records on TWA 800, which I pulled, FOIA records, and there was a statement made by then General Counsel of the Department of Defense, Judith A. Miller. This was a document request by way of the Secretary of Defense, where Congress was asking regarding the Flight 800 crash when they were investigating the so-called friendly fire. Can you give us a list of ships that were active, operational that night? Where were they, and what were the name of the ships? Well, Judith A. Miller, along with the Navy Information Officer, Captain Jack D. Punches, provided back to Congress at the request a list of ships and a map. Now, all of these ships were well to the south of the Long Island area. None of those ships had fired any missiles. They weren't out there that night on a missile exercise. P3 that was coming down from Brunswick, Maine was heading down to try to find, because it was on a sub-finding mission. Okay, so the first area when it comes down from Brunswick, it's going to be their operational, what they call, there's an acronym for it. Not thinking about it at the moment, but it has to do with the IBEX or something with the area that they're working in. And the P3 was coming down, and they are on the air traffic control transcript, where it was Lieutenant Ott. Okay, he was the commander, OTT, Lieutenant Ott. He was the commander of VP-26 at Tridents. The Tridents right now are about 5 miles away from me here at NAS Jacksonville. Okay, they're still flying the P3s. I think the P3 has about 1 more year, and then she's going to be retired, and the jet version, the Poseidon, is going to be taking the place of the P3. I'm going to miss the P3. I like that plane. It's a beautiful aircraft. I worked with P3s when I was working the transit line in Naples, Italy, at Capodichino, the transit line out there when I was stationed in Italy. So, and she has that undistinguishable sound. I hear the P3s firing around here all the time. I say, hey, that's a P3 when you hear it out there. But the Lieutenant Ott stated, we have warning Area 105 is being cold. Can we get directions further down south to the Berg area, the Berg intersection? And ACC gave them directions there to work down there. The long and short of that is when the P3 came this way, was going to go over 105. The P3 was set up with the sono buoys and had no armaments, just to be able to drop sono buoys and work with trying to find submarines. It's just proficiency, just to keep up on finding enemy subs. Technology is always changing. The enemy's changing their technology. We got to change ours to keep up with them. So when they came down, they said 105 is not hot. It's cold. We're going to head on down south. So that was a question I had to ask. How could Mr. Teal state that 105 was active when other records show that 105 was not active? Then, on the list provided by Judith A. Miller, then General Counsel, she stated with the listing by way of Captain Jack D. Punch's the Navy information, the list of ships, the car, and the Leaky Gulf were not on that list. I don't think anybody in the DoD forecasted there was going to be any lawsuits regarding this, but that's beside the point. The point is, this is public records. This is something you have to go by. Now, in Thomas Stalcup's case, there are quite a few charges of the Missile Defense Agency, the U.S. Navy, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all being involved in this system, that they're culpable for this missile somehow, or missiles somehow missing their tow target. Okay, now everything that Thomas Stalcup and the plaintiffs in this wrongful death lawsuit must hinge on depends on the testimony of Mr. Teal. Because if Mr. Teal's statements cannot be validated, then we've got a problem here. I'm not making an opinion other than what records I have. That's all I can do. There are no records which shows that W105 was active. There's no evidence, even radar for that particular time. They've had 25 plus years now for Thomas Stalcup or for anyone to point out and say, this particular radar track is that ship. Why have they not been able to come to find out after this time which ship that was? Or ships, whatever, after all this time? Plus, you have to also take into account all the people that work with the ship when it's at a naval station and it's getting ready to deploy. You have a lot of civilian workers out there. You've got the vendors and supplying of the ship and all the stores. That's a lot of paperwork. People know when they see, when I was on the Kitty Hawk leaving out of San Diego, you couldn't miss it. Hey, we know the Kitty Hawk's gone out to sea. This is not national security. We go out to sea, we operate. Okay, and we pull back into San Diego. There's a lot of paperwork that went on with getting a carrier ready. What are we putting on the ship? We're going to be flying while we're out there. We're just doing a workup for the ship itself. Same thing. If the USS Carr went out to sea, after 26 years, you're going to find records that, via way of the naval station commanders, all the record keeping they have. So when ships go out and come back in, you got the people that are handling the ships on the pier. I mean, there's a lot that goes on here. You just can't, cover all that up, so to speak. There would be some information. So I don't find that the Leaky Gulf or the car was in 105 because my looking for the particular radar tracks. I have not seen or found anyone that has been able to identify and say this was in fact either one of those ships. Now, the Coast Guard, if that warning area was open, the Coast Guard would know this. The Coast Guard would have to know this. Because you want to keep other boats and other ships and things like that, and aircraft in certain areas. So the Coast Guard will certainly know. But again, on to continue with Teal's statements, he stated that after the ships were out there, that they locked on, that they confirmed. He confirmed with the other ship later, as he wrote me actually on a YouTube post. He told me, he said that's the same information Mr. Jack Cashel had put out, that it was the USS Lady Gulf that had shot down Flight 800. So I'm not too happy about the fact that Mr. Cashel went on this website and he was a guest on a website, and it stated on there, it says confirmed U.S. Navy shot down TWA 800. Well, this has not been confirmed. This is just irresponsible journalism all the way around. You can say stated as a theory. We theorize. We have reason to believe. Here's why we believe it. But nothing has been put forward other than basically stating that what Mr. Teal has said is above reproach. There really does not have to be anything checked out on his information. But after the P3 had flown past down the area and Flight 800 did go down, now we do know, okay, this is a whole other avenue, but we do know there's forensic evidence, photographic evidence, evidence from senior investigators who had problems with the upper management and the safety board. So when I say NTSB, I'm talking about the board members. That has to be separated and understood. You have the investigators that are assigned. You get people from different manufacturers, Boeing and TWA or other aircraft manufacturers, or aviation or aeronautical firms, whatever. They'll be assigned. You have experts in particular areas that go in and do the hands-on. Mr. Hank Hughes was very instrumental. He put out several complaint letters about the way the situation was being handled, not being heard. He wrote his analysis with his report. When they asked him, they said, "What do you think happened?" And he said, well, what we look at, what we see is the explosive forces came from outside the aircraft, not the center fuel tank. Okay. You can find Hank Hughes' extended report here on YouTube. Just type in Hank Hughes extended, and it'll take you right to it. You can also look up for his own affidavits through Google or whatever. But I was still finishing up on the P3. Now, when the P3 had gone down and heard the radio chatter that an airline went down, the Navy didn't run. The thing is they shot down this aircraft. Even Mr. Teal said that. Well, after what happened, we destroyed the logbooks and pulled the tapes and destroyed them. And then we ran to Bermuda, and the Lady Gulf ran with us. No. Former Navy, I can't buy that. I know I've been accused, well, you're just trying to defend the Navy because you were in the Navy. Yeah, I was in the Navy, but people, they'll fall back and say, well, what about the USS Vincennes that shot down that Iranian plane? Well, the situation was much different. The evidence comes to find out there was an F-14 that could have been shadowing. That's why they had an F-14 on there, on that aircraft. I mean, it's electronic warfare either way. But given what happened to other ships getting fired on, the commander had to make a big decision. We're getting a threat here. We're getting signals from an F-14 coming in. We're trying to call it and say, hey, look, this is an area where there's conflicts going on. We've got an aircraft coming in toward us. Do we try to take this aircraft out preemptively? Again, that's a whole different story. But the Vincennes didn't run. Okay. So this bit about how you could have two warships out there and then they'd fire on, or actually one, the Lady Gulf, allegedly firing on, and then you have these two missiles that somehow, according to Mr. Teal, there was an aircraft pulling a tow target on a 1,000-foot line. So when you look at a map of 105, all right, and where you would have the exercises taking place, you would have to have both of these missiles missing their lock and confirm it, because Teal said himself, we confirmed the target, we rechecked it again, locked it up. He's talking with the other ship. They're talking back and forth. The operations specialists that have to do with this, these misfiring missiles. And then you got to have the commanders and the captain. I mean, everybody's got to be on board, say, okay, when we're going to launch a live warhead. Okay. And so in this scenario, both missiles take off. Teal said 2 missiles were fired. So they apparently missed the tow target. They turned, completely changed course, began climbing in altitude, because there's only a certain altitude limit you have for tow targets. Weaved its way all the way through, heading north toward Long Island to about 8 miles off the coast, and then hitting the 747. All right. And then my next question was like, well, okay, well, what happened to the pilot or pilots or the crew on this aircraft that was towing this tow target? I haven't heard a word. The only word we've got about this was from the statements from Mr. Teal. Okay. So then he said after that happened, you'd have to watch his own video, but there was a sense of complacency. Okay, oh well, oops, we goofed. I would be without. I mean, you just shot down and killed hundreds of people, and yet the ship just kind of remained in the area. And he said, "Oh, we just went back to business as usual. We went out, and we did some drills, and did some weaving back and forth kind of exercise and stuff. We finally ran to Bermuda." Okay. But then his story kind of changes. First, he says that the tapes and the logbooks were taken to the shred room, where they were destroyed with the shredder and salt water. Then in another account, Mr. Teal states that, well, when they got to Bermuda, officials, that was the word he used, officials came to the ship. He said nobody was allowed to leave the ships, no phone calls, no emails or nothing, but officials came to the ship, and they collected the logbooks and tapes and stuff that would show that they were not there. In other words, cover up. But I'm thinking that's awfully hard to do too, because somewhere down the line, some admiral's going to be saying, "What happened to these logbooks? You got to put these logbooks away. You just can't have them. The logbook just vanished." So I find a hard problem with someone being able to destroy a logbook and have done away with this logbook and these tapes, and nobody higher up. I mean, the commanding officer allowed this? I mean, where are the commanding officers of the Car and the Lady Gulf in this lawsuit? I don't see the commanding officers being pulled forward. And even after all this, you would think that there would be not just going after Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, which is, well, they made this system, and there's problems with this system and a failure to warn. Well, I say this very gingerly. Stelkup states that he has all these documentation, which is supposed to be unique to him. I have the same documentation, CIA documentation that he has. I received those by way of the FOIA through Ray Lair's attorney, John Clark. He was gracious enough to supply me with those same documentations through the FOIA. They've been very instrumental in me doing my investigation on vetting through CIA documentation. Oh, well over 500 pages plus of CIA documentation alone. Um, and then he's talking about these missile systems and stuff. Well, available, there is the report. It's a report to Congress on the disposition of the Aegis systems. Okay, I have those documentations. Now, when I read through those and they show case instances of different test missiles and different test radars and under different conditions and a lot of things that are above my wheelhouse, uh, like I said, I was an aviation boatswain's mate. I was flight deck engineer. I didn't work in those electronic areas, but they're enough for the layperson to be able to understand. Um, so it explained in there whenever they had issues. This missile misfired because of this reason. We had a burnout phase problem halfway through the stage. We couldn't get this missile to talk to that satellite system or just something as they're working out the bugs. The missile had to be, scrubbed. So there's plenty of instances where there were warnings. Stalcup's claim in this lawsuit is that there was a failure to warn. So basically, they went out there and just haphazardly said, we're going to shoot some missiles and see what may occur. And so here he's supposed to have these two missiles that went and hit Flight 800. But that also creates another problem for Stalcup because in his documentary on EPEX films, just entitled TWA 800, which was made, he has a scenario that he showed where he's got three different missiles coming from three totally different locations. One from off land, heading out toward TWA 800. One well to the east, coming toward TWA 800. Then one coming straight up underneath TWA 800. After the first two missiles hit, the aircraft's still flying in his scenario. Then finally, when the third one comes up, that's when the front end is shown to have come off. And then the aircraft, as he says, turns to the left and it falls off into the ocean. Okay. But he doesn't give any possible sources. He was implying that it was the Navy. They've been implying that it's been the Navy for so long, yet when Stalcup sat down with Christine Borgensen, I believe, it was Tom and Christina Borgensen, I believe her name is. Pardon me if I don't get the name right. He was also there with the Air National Guard pilot, Major Fritz Myers, and the spokeslady. And the whole purpose was to point out apparently what the documentary is about. I mean, that's what a documentary is. This is more additional theories rather than a documentary. They said, well, we don't want to speculate. Well, they've not been speculating. They've been stating quite on. We believe that the U.S. Navy, and they only, in my opinion, were able to give legs to this latest lawsuit was just because of Mr. Teal going online to the Stu Peters show and the Duke Report and several others. He even has his own YouTube video, and there you can see my exchange where I had asked him some questions, specific questions, because, essentially do have to play a good cop, bad cop. But you got to find out information, say, hey, I think you're mistaken on this, and this is why. Why did you make this statement? What do you have to back this statement up? I'm doing what most TV reporters are supposed to be doing, which they're not doing. Like I said, I wasn't getting no help from Channel 12, Channel 47. And here we are in Jacksonville, Florida. Here we are, we're a Navy town. And they think because I provided them with court documents to show that the NTSB was in fact found for fraud, that doesn't matter to them. It just astounds me. I mean, who's pulling their purse strings? Anybody talks about Flight 800, oh, you cut it off right off the bat. Um, so again, finish on the P3. After the P3 heard what was occurring, Lieutenant Ott turned that plane around, and they got on the radio and they says, "Look, we do have some rescue equipment on our plane that we could help you with. Is there anything we can do to help with?" So they turned around. The Navy went back and went to help and do what they could do. So no, the Navy didn't run. The P3 went around, circled around for some time, took videos. Through Freedom of Information Act, I received portions of that video showing where the aircraft was flying around, checking that area. And then after they were just apparently told by air traffic control, we've got rescue ships, got the Coast Guard going out there. You're fine, thank you. So you can continue on down south what you were doing. Good evening, sir, and thanks again. So the P3 continued on down. Now, had there been any Navy vessels, okay, within the area, they would have responded. Okay, I don't believe this bit of Navy ships would have, ran. Oh boy, like the little kid. Oh, I broke the window. Let's get out of here. Let's skedaddle, so we don't get in trouble. The P3 returned. Now, when the P3 returned, the P3 would have known if there was any Navy ships out there. Okay, they would have called and said, "Hey, we need your help." Or the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard would have contacted, because if that was an active warning area, they would have known if the car was there. They would have known if the Gulf was there. They would have called, but that never happened. There was never no calls to any Navy ships. Why? Because no Navy ships were out there. Okay. So the Coast Guard responded. Fishing boats. There were a few others boats, and then civilian boats from the area came out that were within a reasonable distance. You can't expect a boat that's 400 miles away to turn around and head back. Number one, you don't want a crash area congested with a lot of boats. That's going to confuse the area. It's going to disrupt an investigation. People can call on their Coast Guard emergency things and say, "This is so and so. We're within 5 miles. We can be there in a half hour. Do you need us for anything?" And they're going to say, "Hey, we've got Coast Guard responding. The police, helicopters, police boats were headed out there. There were a few other civilian people working, but they still had to keep it under control. Okay, especially because it was dark, and that's going to create a dangerous situation at nighttime. So the government and the local government authorities wanted to keep control of that crash area best they could. The Air National Guard was out there with its helicopters, and yes, they were doing what Major Myers called a scanning pattern. Okay, where you just fly in these grids, and they were basically looking for any possible survivors. And the Coast Guard, the ATIC was out there, and they called the Mauritius Coast Guard Station. The police helicopters were out there. It was basically under control. So to look at some boats or could have been apparent boats, we don't know yet. Some reports stated that there was what they call a temperature inversion, which kind of happens where certain things can get marked on a radar screen appearing to be I don't know. I'm guessing here, but it's like when you look at the TV radar, the Doppler, and they can show you how the Doppler signals get densities and pressures to the air. This computer system puts this all together and says, okay, this is a certain area of precipitation or whatever. The same thing. Nobody has ever identified any of those tracks of boats that they were trying to say at one time, "Well, that stuff, flotilla of Navy vessels heading into 105, that's proof the Navy was out there." Well, you suggested that, but you haven't gone back and said, this track was this boat, that track was that boat. They're making accusations or speculations or theories, and they're trying to make them stick. So in this wrongful death lawsuit, you have family members that first believed the NTSB when the NTSB said, "Oh, you're a conspiracy kook if you think a missile took this plane down." Um, um, the peanut butter inside the tank blew up, blew the plane in half. The plane kept on flying along, even better than a standard 747. And when people looked, they thought, "Oh, look, that's a missile." Okay, and then, but for some reason, the CIA had to uh, interject or put in or create another explosion at the top of this hypothetical zoom climb and say, "Oh, that's when the plane blew up." So it blows up twice, and then on the way down, they say the left wing separated, and that it's supposed to have been another explosion. I don't know. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous, and so with that portion, you had the family members are saying, "Okay, we're gonna believe the NTSB. It was a mechanical, electrical spark somehow." Got in there. The tank was empty. It was hot. You had these volatile flame, vapors. They blew up the plane. Okay, and that brought the plane down. And so they sued TWA and Boeing, and they received, quite a substantial amount of money. You can type in their TWA lawsuits and stuff, and you'll find the different stories on how the families back in the time had received a lot of money. Okay, well now you have some of the family members who have changed their mind. Suddenly, they don't believe the NTSB. Oh, I don't know, the NTSB must be lying. We believe a missile brought it down. Okay, so now they're trying to sue again for monetary damages. I mean, to me, this is just my opinion. That's like double dipping. If you already received compensation for a mechanical, okay, you knew what this lawsuit was based on. That it was shown to be a mechanical. People sued for a mechanical. Now they want to go back and say, "Oh, okay, well, we don't believe the mechanical. We want to believe, based on the fact that we now have this whistleblower, um, most recently, that spurred Stalcup and the other people to say, well, we need to look at these, the Raytheon company and Lockheed Martin, and we need to sue them because their system was defective." But then they're kind of like walking a fence. They're saying, well, we're not necessarily suing them for having a defective product, and that's kind of hard because you're continuously testing these things out, and there are technical issues with anything, but everything that they put down there, they had a problem with the launch sequence timing, everything I mentioned before. But you can go to lawstreet.com, or you can put in wrongful death lawsuit, and it will take you to the PDF for the lawsuit. Then you also have to look at what they're accusing Raytheon and of failure to warn. But yet I just pointed out the documents that I have that are available, public records, are about the monies that were appropriated for the Aegis and the ballistic missile defense systems, all the different testings that they did that were listed as we have these technical problems we need to work on. Okay, so this bit of failure to warn, so they want to say, well, we're not necessarily saying it was a defect, we're just saying it was a failure to warn. Well, if the system didn't work like they allege it didn't work, that would be your technical, your defects. So they went from an aircraft defect, a fuel tank, to a missile system being defective. But no, not defective. You failed to warn. So let's just keep throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I'm always, and I always have given everybody, any detractors, the benefit of the doubt. But please, 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 please provide documentation, a bona fide. I get more arguments from people on YouTube or any other, even sometimes in Facebook or whatever. They argue just for the sake of an argument. They don't have anything that they can show. They just want to believe it because they want to believe it. And if I mention, I said, well, that was my job. That was a career in the Navy. It's like, oh, well, stolen valor. You're just saying you're in the Navy. You're just saying this, and you were just saying. I said, that's all fine and well. I said, but you can look up for yourself, and you can find out certain things. I said, but make sure you vet all of your sources carefully, because as I've seen the evolution of this case since it first happened, I've gone back to certain aviation safety sites and all this stuff, and even Popular Mechanics put a report in there of how they believe it was the center fuel tank. That goes to the credibility of Popular Mechanics. You've got the Smithsonian, History Channel, and the others on there that are doing these TWA videos. There's new ones coming out just here at the end of 2022. Aviation sites, there's different names for them. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but they'll put up there, and what they're doing is they're parroting the NTSB report again. I mean, how many times are you going to be parroting the same thing? It's just they're taking, well, I just want to make my cool video, to show about what happened. But that's where the injustice comes in, Now, thankfully, well, that's the right word to use. There are family members that don't believe mechanical. They do believe there was reason that there was missile involvement, because the evidence shows there's missile involvement. And I've talked myself blue in the face and even directed people to these documentations, and they only want to take the board's opinion. The board's final opinion is what they do, because their job is to find for safety issues. Jim Hall himself said, well, we're not in law enforcement. He said, our job is to find a safety issue. And if we don't care if it was a bomb or anything that blew up the tank, we just need to make sure that if a bomb blows up again, we can try to make the tank safer so it won't blow up. So if we had the tank inerted and a bomb blew up, well, you might have a decompression issue, but you won't have a fuel air. That's essentially the way it was, because it really aggravated me when I'd hear Jim Hall come on there. He'd go, well, there's no evidence of a bomb or a missile, and it's staring you right in the face. You got the front of the aircraft. It looks like Swiss cheese, like a shotgun went through it. And how on earth did a center wing tank overpressure? It's just like the JFK magic bullet. The explosion occurred, and then it went forward, and then it stopped, and it turned, and then made a right exit out of the right side of the plane, up at on the nose section, and blasted out all that material. And then you've got those plexiglass windows, or whatever the type of material is. I'm sure it's not exactly plexiglass. Okay, I don't design aircraft. I work with them, but that is just completely like super high heat hit that. Okay, that's photographic evidence. You've got external to internal punctures. Okay, that's documented. All right. You have the same smoky grayish kind of tinge on some of the skin from a nearby missile blast. That doesn't mean that it had to be close enough where you're going to get a lot of shrapnel, but it's going to be close enough where you can get some effect, depending on the dynamics of the aircraft when it was. Oops, didn't mean to cover the camera like that. When the aircraft was its breakup sequence, in other words. Okay, it's on there, and people say, what missile evidence? And I'm saying, well, you're pretty blind, because it's staring me right in the face. I said, being an ABH, I said, I've seen aircraft with missile damage, my training and stuff like this. During Vietnam War, you come back and aircraft would be damaged, not enough to bring them down, but you might have some shrapnel or some hits or whatever of aircraft damage. Or then you would have photographs of aircraft that were hit by a surface-to-air missile. It would be a small impact, a close-in weapon, like a Stinger missile, or a larger anti-aircraft missile, depending on the scenario and what was going on out there. But the whole thing that this whole wrongful death lawsuit is hinging on is they're hoping to try to find any way possible to which they're on the right track, okay, but because it was a missile, but the government's not going to come out and volunteer information on this. What I finally came up with is so there was one of several ways which this is going to occur. Once you ring a bell, you can't unring it. All right. During Ray Laird's lawsuit, there were quite a few appeals. I'm not an attorney, but I understand in certain philosophies what particular court cases are about. You have your en banc petitions. You have your writ of certiorari and every other thing else you want to get to be able to document a particular irrevocable, unrefutable facts. That was the purpose of the genuine issues in the case. Okay, so you can narrow down what is and what isn't. Judge Matt said in his decision, he said, based on the evidence that Ray Laird has provided in his case, he said he's allowed to continue in his claim that the government acted irresponsibly and as the judge said, was found for gross negligence. Now, gross negligence is right up there with being, criminal. At or the highest, felonious action that the NTSB in some instances could not rebuff. They couldn't respond to or answer. Now, you're not going to get this from the CBS Evening News. They're not going to come on and say, oh, yeah, Captain Ray Laird's sued the NTSB, and they were found to be a bunch of liars. The TWA 800 was brought down by external sources. Because they're probably paying their checks. I don't know. But you can't get the media to be what the media used to be. So that's where we're at on this. I wanted to button this up with stating about ringing the bell that you can't unring. There was a petition written, and Captain Laird was trying to find out all the simulations and the data they used for these simulations for the aircraft flight, simply because the government was trying to say that people were mistaking TWA's crippled flight on fire going up. They thought that was a missile. Okay, and then when there was another explosion, they thought, well, that was a missile hitting the plane. Okay, well, this is so far different from anybody as witness reports. That's why Channel 12 News in Long Island actually did an interview with Major Myers, and and my hat's off to Channel 12. They were the only local news media that took this case seriously. The reporter in the case stated that none of the eyewitnesses were allowed to speak at the hearing. The many witnesses said they saw flare-like objects coming up and going over, and then they saw fireball and stuff falling down. They said, we just didn't see this plane flying along, and then all of a sudden it just exploded. We saw things before happening. Some people said I thought it was maybe a rocket or a missile or flare-like object, but it was moving way, way faster than the 747 was. Okay, but I don't want to forget this point. With Mr. Teal's case, this still has to be vetted. A lot of information here. But witnesses stated that they saw objects that appeared to be moving from east to west, or west to east, or north to south, or south to north, or whatever, in different areas. Okay? Now, at times, in the afternoon and the evening, you can get glints of sunlight off of aircraft at different altitudes. Okay? You can get contrails. But then when the explosion's occurring and you got the streams coming up, a lot of things you've got to take each individual witness account on its own merits. Okay? But now, had the Lady Gulf been out there, according to Teal's statements, there would not have been as much confusion as has been inferred from a lot of different statements. Okay, you got to kind of reverse engineer this, because number one, we do know is there's the forensic evidence that the plane was affected by missiles. Okay, by external explosive powerful forces. Okay, not an internal poof from vapors from kerosene. Okay, so if the Lady Gulf was out there and the Lady Gulf fired 2 missiles, all right, you would see both these missiles come up from the same geographical location, coming toward where Flight 800 was. Okay, I don't find any witness statements where you just have 2 streaks coming up from the same geographical location. Now, depending on what witness caught what portion of the event early on, in the mid, halfway through, whatever portions they saw. Again, each witness statement by its own merits. But to try to explain 1, 2, looking this way, something that appeared to be coming from the north to the south, south to the north, east to the west, whatever, you don't find somebody that says, because you would clearly see if you had 2 rockets coming up from one area from the Lady Gulf getting fired. Okay, I don't find that. Plus, in some accounts, you've got more than 2 detonations. You've got quite a few different flashes of light. That's going to account for more than just the 2 missiles. So either you include or you uninclude Teal's statements. Accordingly, it's only that 2 missiles were fired and those 2 missiles brought down Flight 800. But again, after 26 years, I found no one that's come up and says, this track here is, okay, the ship that fired the missile. And now this is inferring the Navy, okay? And this is inferring the current court case. I have more information I'll put on another video. But at this point, we can only go as far as what we know, what we have now. Okay, they've got to turn around and say 105 was open when there's evidence that it wasn't. They've got to say that the car and the Lady Gulf were out there when other records say they weren't. And again, that's going to bring more people in. But then I had to ask the question too, where does this leave the National Transportation Safety Board? They're the ones in the first place that said, oh, there's no missile. This is mechanical. Okay, well, if it was a missile, and the investigators were telling the board members higher up it's a missile, but they didn't want to hear a missile, they said, well, we just have to find for a safety issue. That's, I can't wrap my head around that, but that's a whole nother chapter in this book. You know, the government fairy tale here. But we got to go with what we know. We know, and this is again based on the records we have. I was not open. The car was not operational. The Lady Gulf was not operational. No 2 missiles were fired, came out of inventory, not finding. There's too many people involved, like I said earlier. Then you got to have the Coast Guard was out there. They didn't say that this warning area was open. There was no Navy ships they saw out there. They didn't make any radio calls. Hey, you guys, you got to come help. A plane just went down. The P3 came back, flew around. They offered assistance. They didn't call to, hey, we're exercising out here. We know that ship A and ship B's out here. Hey, guys, come give a hand. No, we've got a whistleblower saying, no, we were out there and, oops. Okay, so we ran. I'm sorry. I can't accept that until there's other evidence. Prove me wrong, prove me wrong. Okay, but as far as it goes now, I was trying to get to the last point. This shows the complexity of this, and this is only about this much out of the total complexity of the case I've been working on for 20 years, which is this much. So there's a lot to this. So anyway, when Lair was looking for records for the CIA and any other top security, such as the National Security Agency, the National Security Agency Act, I believe it was from the late 50s somewhere, regarding that they don't have to tell you anything about anything. The only thing the National Security Agency had to say is we don't have um, anything regarding the crash of Flight 800. Okay, but I don't know if they had the wrong spokesperson come out there. They weren't up to speed. They didn't get the memo or something. But they went on and their responses to computer simulations. They said, in essence, that while we were monitoring Flight 800 that night, they could have just said, well, yeah, we're out there and we always see all kinds of flights around the world. We're part of the system that's watching flights take off and come in. That's part of what the NSA does. We monitor this communications, that communication, listen to shifts, listen to telephone calls. We spy on grandma when she's in the bathroom. Whatever they got to say that they've got to do here. Okay. But they did kind of ring that bell, and they can't unring it now. They said, well, we were monitoring Flight 800 at that time, but we can't give you the details because the system we're using is one that monitors foreign weapons testing. And I said, well, if you're just normally, is that coincidental? I mean, if this is just a mechanical plane that's flying along and oops, electrical spark, blew the plane up. All I could say was we were monitoring the plane, and then radio traffic was normal on the plane. The same thing ATC was getting. We got on our record, so we're flying along, we're climbing up to 15,000 feet now. Then all of a sudden, silence, and then the plane falls. No, they said, our National Security Agency said, well, we were monitoring the system with systems we use for foreign weapons systems evaluations and stuff like this, for ballistic missiles and stuff like this. And like I said, once they stated that, and it's even in print. Now, unless they want to turn around, somebody from the NSA wants to say, "Oh, well, we just made a total mistake. We didn't mean to say that at all." You would have to narrow that down. That there was the missiles were involved were foreign weapon testing, and it didn't involve our Navy. We were allowing again. This is points I'm not vetting. The only thing I can tell you is what the documentation said. Okay, in this petition and what their response was back. We were monitoring Flight 800 for foreign weapons testing. We can't divulge any of that. It would divulge how we are able to evaluate foreign weapon systems. Well, in the same documentation that StelCup has about different Aegis systems, we have our allied navies. It listed quite a few different allied navies. I'm not going to say any one of them right now because until I get the list in front of me, then I will bring it back up. But it was Japan was one of them. I know that. And I'm pretty sure the Spanish Navy, because we also work with them with the ballistic missile defense, the Aegis system for ballistic missile defense. Okay, like if Russia is going to fire a missile, our Spanish neighbors can try to intercept it with their Navy and all of this. And so it could be that there was some kind of missile platform out there, and it didn't necessarily have to look like a Navy ship. Okay, that was out there, and that this foreign weapons testing was evaluating something that the NSA was akin to. But of course, when you come back around to, well, there's missile damage, our Navy, who else, right? It had to be our Navy. And so at that point, that's where the lawsuit's at right now. They're knocking stuff back and forth, and they're on their tenant's court. They put in something. The court said you need to respond. There was failure to respond, so they wanted to stay. They needed more time. So it's a back and forth, back and forth. You didn't respond. You got to respond. Okay, well, let's try this. Let's try that. Well, give us an answer. Possibly, part of what I wrote as I said, I sent 2 packages, one in October and another one in November, addendums with follow-ups of information, chapters and verses, and statements that were made and different documentation. I even burned copies of those documents from the FOIA that I had received regarding the statements made from the earlier Department of Defense General Counsel and the Navy Information Officer about those operational ships. And I says, look, Catherine D. Cross, Krass, Crass is her last name. She's the current DOD General Counsel. I said, they put down there, I said, the USS Carr and the Lady Gulf are not on that list. Okay, we got a whistleblower out there that says he was out there, they're working on 105. They surely did shoot off some missiles. It was supposed to hit this tow target, and apparently it didn't. But what confuses me is because they're supposed to be tracking these missiles, and they were totally unaware of what hit what until after, as Teal said, well, we're looking for battle damage assessments. And then all of a sudden, somebody comes over the radio thing, and they said, oh, I think we just hit an Airbus. And Teal says, well, what's an Airbus? And they said, civilian plane. And they're like, oh, okay. But the whole time they didn't know where these rockets were going, because as soon as they go off course, you can do an automatic self-destruct. These things went all the way across out of 105, at least 25 miles. When I measured it, at least. Okay, to get to the coast of Long Island, they state that TWA was 8 nautical miles off the coast, and it was climbing to 15,000 feet. Was the last command. The NTSB even volunteered as much information to say that they got the aircraft at 15,000, even though they ultimately came up and said, well, it's 13,800 feet. But that's for another report that I have, which is available. I have on. I'll try to remember to leave a link with this video, but it's for my 25-second omission that the NTSB, they omitted 25 seconds of flight data. Okay, and I've been working on that for quite some time and learned a lot about flight data recorders and how these systems work, and show how they used those 25 seconds, because they had to have 20 of those seconds had to be for their zoom climb. So while they say the plane had stopped, no, the plane was still in flight and was still recording, and those recording records shows what happened to the aircraft. Okay, so at that point, I think I'm going to leave it right there, and I will come back later with some further updates. Like I said, today's January 13th, Friday, 2023. I just did want to give an update on this latest wrongful death lawsuit. I've not received any information back, any letters or phone calls. I left my phone number and everything with Catherine D. Crass, the General Counsel of the Department of Defense. I also sent 2 letters of the same information, basically, to the General Counsel of Raytheon and the General Counsel of Lockheed Martin, explaining the situations in defense of the United States Navy. Again, we're looking at either they're going to accept that, or they're going to say, hey, to protect the foreign weapons testing interests, if push comes to shove, we might have to throw the Navy under the bus. Yeah, see, the Navy did do it. But then they've got to come up and they've got to have bona fides. They've got to show who, what, when, where, how, why, what ship, and the whole 9 yards, all the other questions I asked. And other things I'll be posting in text on my Facebook page. But anyway, I'm going to button it up. I've spent more than enough time on this area, but I hope that I have educated, informed, and interested some people on this. We have a right to know how our government works, and especially when 230 innocent people lost their life. That's what's important. And for the government to just, they should have just told the truth the first time. Hey, this is what happened, man. There's, terrible accident happened. I think really in the long run, it really would not have been as bad as people were panicking and thinking, oh, no, whatever. But I think as the old adage goes, the truth prevails. Maybe not as quickly as we would like it to, but for all the families and out there who believe it was a mechanical, I don't have any issue with that. People that believe that it was missile fire, I can accept that. What is important is that if there are public records and there are questions, they need to be addressed. I would certainly want to know if it was my family member. Okay, if they were lost in any kind of transportation accident, I would want to make sure that I knew what happened. Even the worst case or the best case or the worst case. I mean, whether it was just a simple accident or whether it was something a little bit more, we don't want to hear that, our loved ones are killed because of, a missile hitting an aircraft or something like this or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. And I encourage people to go online to Google. You can look up wrongful death lawsuit, TW 800/Tom Stalcup, and that's usually going to give you a lot of different pages. You can also look up on the YouTube, the William H. Teal III, 3/lines. He was on Stu Peters and the Duke Report and several others, or just other maybe articles about his statements. And I'm just the messenger here. I just reported what I see, and there's a lot of questions that got to be answered. And that's where we're at. So if anybody has anything constructive to say, okay, questions, answers, so we can have a dialogue on this, okay, I welcome it. All right, so this is Aaron, and I'm out.